Greetings. I am Lucifer Fulci from luciferfulci.com. Welcome to my portion of April Ghouls Day 2021. Today I will be reading you a story I call Samhain. Samara came back from her room with her black hooded sweat jacket freshly pulled over her tiny head, and numb to her surroundings other than the video game she was eager to get back to playing. She could hear the music coming from Dad's room just as loud as the branches hitting the side of the building up at the windows of their third-floor apartment in Grand Blanc, Michigan. The two sounds seemed to go together, here in this new and chilly season of autumn. The music was minor and darkly created, something always spooky from Dad. The branches were bare and surely cold, as the temperature for this October was colder than the last. It almost felt like winter, but it was not. This was the fall, and Halloween was just around the corner. You could smell it in the chilled air, the scent of the supernatural, creeping in upon the all-too-normal world that we live in almost all year round. It swirled between the drifting clouds of gray, creating skyward sketches of skeletal expressions in each and every burst. They would dance and sway into one another and hide the sun with their mammoth magic in the cooling skies. The horror was alive in every pumpkin patch-filled landscape that coated this old world of Michigan. The leaves were colors of the burning of souls, all red, brown, and orange, and they coated the ground like a red carpet event, inviting the everlasting haunts of the next world to come into ours. It was inside the scent of each and every pumpkin pie made, the ghostly presence of something otherworldly that was alive forever, simply hiding until the 3rd of September to the 3rd of November. It is the spirit of Samhain, the very breath of living death that had already begun to show its wicked, glowing eyes, and was about to jump about and scare the daylights out of you. Yes, you. Scaring the daylights is such a great expression for this too. To literally bring about a fear, a loathing of this thing unknown to most, that would take any and all light from the comfort of the soul and replace it with some darkness that fed upon you like a cancer. A fear alive, an unnameable thing that reaches out to each and every year without fail, if only to take us on a ride of a lifetime, for in the end it would bring us death. Samhain spoke in every laughter that Samara heard in her house, for it was truly a house of horror. It was a home and family that celebrated Halloween as if it were Christmas and welcomed the beyond into their daily menu of activities. The supernatural danced about the home in the music that Dad made and in all the paintings made by her mother. Where was Mom, anyways? Sarah was a beautiful thing. She was a rare breed of beauty that would never need a lick of makeup or adorning extras to be witnessed as the most beautiful woman in the universe. She has a soft and sweet shape to her tiny body with bits of pudge all in the cutest areas. Her freckles lent her an innocence that would not be covered up by the multitudes of colorful ink that was pasted upon her skin. Her shoulder-length, dyed, jet-black hair was soft and flowing, never overdone or needing to be. Sarah's smallish-looking head made her look only more adorable, with its shape mocking that of an oversized apple. Her smile was priceless, hinting at something perfectly imperfect as one small spooky tooth peeked out from the otherwise straight set of chompers. She was surely amazing in more ways than her sweet looks, but the fact remained that she was a witch. Sarah called the corners and cast spells from the silence of her mind. willing and magic in and about her home, her family and friends without a sound. She would wish well upon all those deserving and often find herself releasing resentment against those she would rather curse. This particular day, she was on her way home from Stir the Imagination, the local New Age store that had recently relocated from Flint to Goodrich. It was a much better location, and the sales had the owner, Sarah's spooky acquaintance, Rhonda, in great spirits as of late. She had paid the store a visit earlier in the cool daytime and was bringing something quite special home to share with her very own Addams family. The door crept open slowly and Sarah peeked in, attempting to put a scare into her daughter. Without taking her eyes away from the video game, she spoke in a bored, bratty voice. "I see you, Mom. You're not scary." Mom walked in at a normal speed now, smirking to herself. What is truly scary now is how much of a zombie that game has turned you into. Sarah walked to the kitchen table and set down her reusable Halloween tote. She took a deep breath and smiled. Taking a seat, she opened the bag and gazed inside. There was a shadowed orange glow that peered out with a slight brightness, capturing her attention. She was spellbound. The moment caught Samara's attention and she put down the gaming control. In less than a minute, they were both standing at attention at what a magical thing was within the bag on the modest kitchen table. Sarah reached inside the bag and revealed the thing that lay within. It was a sphere the size of a small bowling ball. It was alive in its black and orange colors, the two swallowing each other and then revealing themselves again, black into orange and then back, again, shadowed, a darksome spirit that dwelled under the fiery light that was somehow alive. The mother took it out of the bag, holding it dear and close, loving it from the first time she had set eyes upon it. It had become a thing of obsession for her, a scene of beauty and lust within some kind of structure she couldn't fully understand but had to possess. It was powerful. It was amazing to her. It made Sarah feel like something she had never felt before. This thing had been called many names throughout the span of time, but held only one common reason for existence. It was the sphere of Samhain, the gateway to all worlds that were Halloween. It held endless stories, songs, and immortalities inside of it, and had been kept secret and safe among a coven of witches that had first come to know it in the ghastly years of the Salem witch trials. For the saddened survivors of the pagan Holocaust, it was hope and faith for the beliefs and prayers that they were in wicked union with. Sarah and Samara were both mesmerized and began to quiver at the thing before them. They both started to laugh, softly at first and then louder, prompting the attention of Dad in the next room. Father opened the door and saw what he could not believe. What was this before him? Samara took notice of her dad and began to back away from her mother, moving towards the window that faced south. The wind outside picked up its dramatic pace, and the bare branches danced against the windows again, this time louder than before. Music from the bedroom became static, and then the sounds of some sorrowful composition that Father had been working on through the night burst about. Back and forth from music to static, it became louder and louder. It created an atmosphere of uneasiness and previewed the morbid scene that awaited them. Sarah screamed. She cried uneasily. It was glowing even brighter in her hands. It was beginning to get warm and then quite hot. The light became a hellish heat, but Sarah refused to set it down. Even if she wanted to, it would not let her. She had crossed some barrier that could not be explained. Somewhere else, in all the worlds that were connected to this mysterious orb, all life felt a part of her. Something of all of her fears and dreams, her flesh and soul were all shifting from within her to without. A taste of her senses began to break apart, flying towards oblivion. 100 million worlds of hell were becoming colored with the depths of her being. She was coming apart at the very seams that held her body and soul as one. Samara was backed against the wall behind her, wishing that she could claw her way out. She was terrified and confused. A warm wetness escaped between her tiny legs and stained her skin, warmed her feet in the ground below her. Even the last time she had wet the bed was nothing like this. Her mother did the same, but her piss was inked with blood. Sarah's hands were burning as she shook, holding the tiny sphere of Samhain. The stinking wetness that crept down her leg was not only her frightened piss, but also the glowing lusts that were alive in her dying body. To have such pleasure, such fear and pain at the same moment was a delicate, delirious balance between heaven and hell. It was the moment, and it was now. The smell of burning flesh arose from her fingertips, marking not the sphere with any effect. Her skin began to blacken, cracking from the edges of her fingernails and down her palms, inside and out. It was a sour smell, a barbecue of sickness, and sprinkled wet globs of blood glazed ash and skin upon the floor like morbid glue, each drop splashing and then burning the carpet below her. Her insides began to boil. Sarah could feel it in her bones, from her feet to her skull. It was a jittery, painful cracking within. The pressure of bone against bone was magnified by the sickening melting of the cartilage that surrounded them. It burned like acid and began to infect the fluids that kept her body in living motion for her short-lived 32 years. She let loose her bloody bowels, black and red shit piling out of her ass in a massive amount. It blew out her tiny panties that were barely covered up by knee-high Gothic skirt that she had felt so proudly to sport today. The smell of her waist quickly joined the otherworldly burn and the stench of the deathly room about her now. Her family looked on in aghast, unable to even move an inch. They were spellbound in every sense of the word and watched on with a gory glee that was not their own. The beautiful ink that stained her skin for years of tattooing began to bubble over. They were smallish, zit-sized boils at first, each one popping up and out of her skin and releasing a white pus that smoked and sizzled. They became larger as they broke from her soft body and almost immediately destroyed the thousands of dollars worth of body art that she cherished so. Larger bubbles began to form over the entirety of her flesh and pop like small balloons, setting free the blood and waste that laid within. A deep, unearthly tone bellowed from within the sphere, calling the dark spirits from all worlds of horror to make themselves known through the impending death that was befalling Sarah. Each one would speak in even the tiniest drip of blood, and with each cry of pain or pleasure, the beasts of Halloween would be singing the praises of the living dead in their song. From the top of her head, the dyed black locks began to fall out and melt against the side of her face. Her cheeks were stained red, deep red, and they had severe, deadly wounds, appearing as seconds rolled by like eternity. Her balding scalp was bubbling with sickness and boils too, each one pulsating with an unlife of its own. Sarah continued to cry. Her once baby blue eyes turned black from behind the whites as tears of blood filled up from within their sockets. A soggy tar began to ooze its way from her skull and out of her ears. Not long after, blood and pinkish chunks of brain began to explode from within her cranium and out of her lobes. It splashed and splattered, all with combined squishy sound, as she began to implode. Tiny shreds of her breaking skull made their way out too and joined with the mush that was once her personality. Her eyes sank in as she chewed off her own tongue, swallowing small pieces of it and then throwing them back up in massive heaves. The more she gagged, the greater she blew chunks of her wasted innards. Her melting guts were making their way up too. It was with one final nasty explosion that the remains of her liver, intestines, and kidneys shot upward and out, flying about and hitting her daughter straight in the face. Wild remnants of her insides fell into Samara's mouth and forced her to vomit right along. Convulsions of hell mocked the lost life that was once Sarah as her pink, thick nipples began to swell and bleed. They cracked down the center, splitting her tits open like a knife was cutting her from within. More blood rushed down her stomach and in between her legs, staining the ground as it began to steadily soak it in. Her body was in full shatter-dead mode now, and her hands still held tight the wicked sphere. The veins inside of her were bursting, and a rain of crimson glory showered all around her. There were cracks that both bled and smoked as she danced about in her jittery falsity of life. Her husband watched on for only a moment more until his collapse. He was down and out, but not nearly dead. Sarah fell to her knees, finally, and then straight onto her face. The puddles of blood steamed and bubbled, and her mangled body wiggled in her vomit, pus, guts, and bone. The sphere floated still, alive and glowing, about the scene of the hallowed massacre. It rose up above the mess and began to communicate with the young girl, Samara. I will show you things that will define your life, child, now and always. Samara sank into a deep, deep sleep and began to dream. Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed this delicious tale of sweetness. Happy April Fool's Day, everybody.